Hello, beautiful light-filled souls. Today's interview is with Dr. Sharon Prentice, who is the author of Becoming Starlight, Surviving Grief and Mending the Wounds of Loss. She writes about losing a child and her husband, and it is a beautifully written, powerful memoir. She is also a spiritually focused psychotherapist who had her own STE, spiritually transformative experience, when her husband died. And she is amazing. I'm really a fan. So I hope you'll just jump in and check out this interview, which is more of a conversation from the last summit. But her emphasis and her practice is helping people discover what's really ailing them, mind, body, soul, and transforming it into a vibrant and wonderful way of being in this world. I'm so excited to be here with Dr. Sharon Prentice. She is a psychologist. She works in hospice. She's written a beautiful book called Becoming Starlight. And when I read it, I just felt like I understood so much about her journey. Something about it just clicked with me. Even though we've lived such different lives, I recognize the passion, the authenticity, the honesty in that book. And it really struck me. So I don't know if I've even said that to you before, but I just recognized you as a writer when I read that book.
Well, that's funny, Tricia, because Lisa, our mutual friend, from the minute she read my book, the minute she read your book, she told me we were soul sisters. We were from the same tribe. All we had to do was pick it up and we'd feel it, we'd see it, and we know it. Because you can recognize truth. You can recognize truth when you've seen it yourself. You recognize it in someone else. So thank you.
Yeah, and what I really recognized was the honesty about grief and suffering. You didn't hold back, and you spoke about this in a way that I really think is healing for people, because we need to know that we go through anger, like we go through really deep anger, like when
Yes.
facing a great loss. And, you faced one that really took you to your knees early on, and you lost a daughter. And this is such a wound. When I counsel people who want a medium reading or want to talk about near-death experiences, it's the hardest one. It always shocks me when I come in contact with someone, because you almost don't have the words to help someone.
There aren't any words. There literally are not any words. And the anger, the rage takes the place of the grief that you cannot feel, because it is so intense, it is so life-altering, and it is so terrifying to stare into the reality of what has just happened to you. It's much easier to be angry and to walk around with this rage-filled spirit that where you just want to throat punch everybody that you come into contact with. That's so much easier than asking for help and saying, I don't know how to handle this.
Yeah, so what do you say to people when you contact someone who's going through something similar, who's lost a kid?
First thing that I think is very important for people to understand is what not to say. That is even more important than what to say. A lot of people, well, they don't know. Like I said, there are no words. And so even just saying something like, I have no words, I have nothing, that lets the person that you're talking to understand that you get it. You get it. I heard things like, oh, the best one, God knows best. Oh, at that particular point in time, if there was a God, I hated him. I thought he was the most vengeful, horrible entity, if he even existed, because how could a loving God take a child? I begged, I pleaded, I bargained, I did all. Take me, and I wasn't listened to. I didn't realize until a lot later that what it was I was pleading, begging, and bargaining with, it didn't exist. The God of my childhood was very, very different than the God that I came to find through this entire process. So knowing what not to say, actually just sitting with someone with a slight touch, just the gentleness of your soul speaking to them, is so much more important. And I never tell someone it's going to get better. I never say to someone, you'll start to live again and you'll find joy again. And that is the last thing So it's actually, seriously, it is more important what not to say. And it is more important to sit silently and gently and lovingly with someone so that they know you're there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because those of us with empathy can literally feel that
Yes.
pain. It's palpable. Like when I come in contact with it, one speech, there were 5 women who'd lost teenagers and kids, and it was like hitting a wall of pain. Like it was just palpable, and all I could do was hug them after the talk and say, hey, "Thank you for being here," and I feel what you're going through. That makes a lot of sense.
And I never, ever, ever talk to people about finding closure. Closure is a myth, especially when you're dealing with someone who has lost a child. I talk about incorporating that loss, making it part of you, growing with it. So the people that you have lost become the shadows of your soul. They're always going to be there. And I have actually said to people before, why on earth would you even want closure? When someone has said to me, well, so-and-so told me to find closure, or I went to this therapist who said, you're going to find closure. And I'm like, why? Why would you want to close out a part of your life that is part of your soul? Why would you want to close out a person who helped form who you are? Well, I wouldn't want to do that. And incorporating that and not living in the moment of death. So that's the biggie right there. Living in the moment of death keeps you from, it totally negates the rest of someone's life. A lot of people live in that moment of death because they think if they go out of that, they will lose forever the person that they have lost, not realizing.
That makes a lot of sense.
Staying there, they negate the entire life of someone.
And one of the things that I loved from our last talk, we were chatting, and I really got the sense that Stephanie, your daughter, was with you, and that she's growing up with you. And I've heard this from Jeff Olson, who lost a young kid. And tell me more about what that is like. I feel blessed, that I got a little glimpse of her, and she really seemed like this perfect part of you, if that makes sense, like the best parts of you.
She absolutely was. I like that, the best part of me, because she was. And in the beginning, feeling her around me was so incredibly painful. Not acknowledging that was even more painful, because then when I didn't feel it, that shame, that survivor guilt, that come back, I didn't mean to kill you again, one of those things. It's very, very difficult when you're still in the stages of grieving. And, those stages can last for years and years and years. I eventually worked through it, and knowing that she's with me now, I still cry, but I smile. She makes me smile because I feel the love.
And that's a beautiful thing. And you explain it so well that, the physical part, the earthly part of us suffers and goes through grief and has all kind of reactions to that. And when the light comes in, when the spiritual side of things comes in, it's a different feeling altogether. It's not like it makes the physical go away. It just opens a doorway or a pathway to another experience. At least that's the way I describe it. Is that how you describe it?
I do. It's such a strange thing, because I don't just feel that spiritual presence. I can see her. In my mind's eye, I can see her. And, one of the things that helped me tremendously was something Gary Zukov said. And he said, why can't I see what she brought to me? What was the lesson that she taught me? And I'm going, lesson? You want to know what lesson I learned from death? And he's like, wait a minute. Out of every soul in the universe, this little soul chose me to be her mom, even for a very short period of time. The love that she brought to me was so incredible. And think about that for a second, Tricia. She chose me to be her mother. What was she bringing to me besides just this ultimate? She was so close to heaven. You know, children are so close to heaven. They don't have any limiting beliefs. They don't have any limits on love. You know, so she brought me this true, unconditional, just a renewal of life. But I was too angry to see it for a very long time. And Gary's words helped me a lot. So today, when I think back on that, I feel her, I see her, and I smile with her. You know, I see her in my dreams. I actually wrote something for Compassionate Friends, calling me in my dreams, because I have built a life with her in my dreams because she's there.
And I just interviewed Lisa Jones. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she lost her husband. And we talked a little bit about that. And in your book, when you get to that loss, though there's something just transformative and amazing. Both of you had these spiritually transformative experiences. And I don't want to make you retell it because it's in the book and people can, go through that. But I love what you said about how Steve knew that you just couldn't make it if you didn't get a piece of that. And there is that sense of we get what we need, in order to keep going, because here we are and surviving. And but what did you learn? Like, how did that differ from religion and that experience for you?
Every single thing I thought I knew about God, about religion, about all of that stuff got kicked to the curb. It was nothing like I had been taught. You sit in the pulpit from the time you were a kid. I was raised in the church, and you hear the thou shalls and the thou shall nots and all of these things that are based on, I believe, greed and control and power and all of those things. And, you got to do exactly what they tell you to do. You're going to be damned and lightning's going to come down and strike you. And God is this vengeful. I believe that. Even after Stephanie died, I believe that. But that experience I had with Steve, and you're right, he knew I wouldn't make it. I joke about it now, and I say that when he got to where he was going, he looked at all of creation and he looked at God and he said, you got to give this woman a peek. You got to show her what's going on or she is not going to survive. It's that, and I think that God finally said, I have had enough of you. Get up here and let me show you. I joke about it now because it totally altered everything I ever believed. What I found was not at all what I had been taught from a child.
And how did that change you moving forward? Did you feel like the after effects, like near-death experiencers go through, just this opening up of experiences that you hadn't had before?
Yeah, it was deafening. It was so loud. And yet at the same time, it was so calm and soothing and just loving, Didn't go to church anymore. I went a few times and it was like, no, you're missing the mark, folks. This is not.
Well, what were they missing? Because that's interesting. Did you find some that you resonated with and some? No. Really?
No, I didn't. Because I was still hearing that thou shalt and thou shalt nots and sin and God's going to punish you and, all of those things that are meant to control you. That wasn't what I found. There was no vengeful anything in that place where I went. It was just love and forgiveness and all of those things that you hear about that you think, are they really possible? Does that kind of forgiving, I can't even find the right word. I don't want to say attitude because it wasn't an attitude. It was a space of complete, you did good. Now tell me about your day. That's what it felt like,
I do know, there's this sense of we are so hard on ourselves here. I think, there's so many pressures that we put on ourselves and there are survival pressures. But what I felt was, I'm okay. Like, I'm really okay the way I am. And to experience that love is the greatest healing experience imaginable. And most healing seems to come from love, like that scene, whether it's just connecting to that energy of God or learning to love yourself more. That's my belief at this point.
I had so many layers and layers of hidden limiting beliefs, okay, that kept me living by default, made me comfortable living by default, not looking outside of it because that was too scary. And once that experience was over, I realized that those limiting beliefs had kept me from the joy that was my birthright. That love that was my birthright. And I no longer wanted to live in default because that wasn't what creation had in store for me.
So what do you tell people? I come across people who often say, I don't even know how to experience joy. I don't even know how to find myself. I'm so miserable in this job, this relationship. I don't have my sole purpose. They feel like they can't make that breakthrough and they can't connect to God in that loving way. What do you say to people who feel lost?
As a therapist, I have to tell them that they are living within those same limiting beliefs, living by default, that I lived in. And you must do the shadow work. Because as you and I have talked before, self-induced trauma can come from any place, especially from these limiting beliefs. And doing that shadow work, you have to get rid of that dark, damp place to let that light come out. You're never going to find the joy and the peace that you were meant to have until and unless you do the hard work of getting in there, facing what you don't want to face, and kicking all that stuff to the curb, because that's what's ruining so many people's lives.
Where do you suggest people begin with shadow work? I mean, therapy is a great place, but what helped you the most, and what could you point people in the direction of?
What helped me the most was finally being honest with myself. I had to stop believing the lies that I was telling myself, the lies that other people were telling me about my life, the ones that I accepted. Looking at all of those things is a dismantling of yourself. It really is. It's terrifying to stare into that place and to be seriously honest and truthful with yourself. You've got to start the process. And usually that starts with, in my practice anyway, people looking at me and I say, why are you here? What brought you here? Here comes the sobbing, because they really don't even know. That's the beginning, the tears.
Yeah. Yeah. And, this is something that I don't know if you would agree with or not, but I've sat with myself, and during the pandemic, even I've sat with myself, and instead of stopping an emotion at some point, I just kept writing. And if I was angry, I got angrier and I got more rage. And then I was like, no, I had more, and no, go burn it and just beat on drums and get angrier and angrier until it's all gone. And then I was like, okay, now I'm done. Now I process that. And then forgiveness happens when you walk all the way through it. But I think we stop ourselves a lot because we go, oh, a nice woman wouldn't get that angry. I'm already at that angry woman place, and I went past it.
But you know what? I like that angry woman place, because that is the beginning of the end of who you thought you were. And that burning ceremony, that ritual, we all have rituals, whether it's just going and making yourself a cup of coffee at 9 o'clock every morning or whatever time. Those are rituals. And that burning ritual, I've used that for 20 years. I tell people, write the letter, burn it, write whatever it is that's bothering you, burn it, rewrite your story, burn the old story. And just seeing something, those ashes, going up, you get to where you go. Okay, I can rewrite my story. I can do that. It's that, I call them sacred moments. I do a lot of sacred word therapy. But those sacred moments, people will go, what's a sacred moment? I said, it's so quiet. You think you might miss it. But that sacred moment for everybody is truly your soul's, how can I say this? Your soul's truthful knowledge, okay? And it's calling you home. It is for your highest purpose. And all of these rituals, the angry woman, the burning, the lighting candles, the whatever it is that you may need to do, all of those play a role in getting that shadow work done so that you can access the peace and the joy that belongs to you. You don't have to ask anybody for it. You know, we've all given authority over our lives to people that have no business telling us who and what we are. But we have allowed that. And so when you get involved in these rituals, you take that authority back. That is where you can find your joy and your peace.
Yeah. So, what are some of the common lies that people tell themselves?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. You know, I guess the easiest way to answer that is just to look at how many times you have felt not enough. How many times you have felt unworthy? How many times you blamed yourself? How many times you shamed yourself? How many times you felt guilty about something? How many times you went around your your boundaries, and you said yes when you really wanted to say no? Okay, all of these things just play into the lies because it's so much easier. Like you say to someone, sure, I'll do that. And you, oh God, why did I say yes? I didn't really want to do that. Here comes the but. Everything after but is either an explanation or an excuse. But I didn't want to hurt their feelings, and it was okay, and I'm going to do it. And then what happens? The resentment comes and all that other stuff. So the lie ain't working anymore. And so what happens then? You feel guilty because you did it. You feel shame because you feel resentment toward that person. They all play together and not for your highest good.
Yeah, so worthiness, I think, is at the core of a lot of cheating in relationships, a lot of self-sabotage, a lot of drug addiction. I mean, there's you could say just worthiness, am I worthy of goodness, abundance, love, all the just feeling worthy of these things is tough when people come from backgrounds where they weren't treated as if they were worthy of these things. So that seems to be like the major healing work. What do you think has been, I mean, the spiritual answer is important, but what do you think when in your practice, when you work with people, what do you think has been the building block that has helped people see their worth?
Oh, if I knew that. I
I
knew you were going to get to a question that I was like, oh my. Once again, it goes back to truly looking at yourself and being honest with who you are, your behaviors, your everything you've learned, everything you've been taught. I mean, it is a tiny little thing, and yet what I find very interesting is that this feeling of unworthiness is huge in our society. It's absolutely huge. We claim this victimhood now more than we ever have. You know, it's so much easier to be someone's victim than it is to look at yourself and realize that you're your own victim.
Yeah, no, that's been a huge change for me. It was, I think it was Phil Good Life who said this, but it just stuck in my mind. And he was like, if you're in a situation that isn't great, tell yourself, instead of going, oh, I hate this guy, or I hate this work situation, or I hate to go, it's really interesting that I'm choosing this. Why am I choosing this? Really, really interesting. And it gives you the power, because then you're going, okay, there's a reason why I'm choosing this. What's that reason? Have I learned it? Can I go? Are we done here? Or do I have to go further into this to understand what it is I'm working out?
You know, one of the biggest reasons people don't do that is just plain old fear. Just fear at what they're going to find when they peer into that place. You know, most people do not ask the questions that you just asked of yourself because they're afraid of what the answers are going to be. And so they just go along telling themselves they're happy and they smile and they're pretty and the girl smiles back at them and they're happy, like I said, to live in default. And it's such a sorrowful place to be. And that's why people go home and they cry in the shower or they don't sleep at night or, they get into drinking and drugs and all of that shaming and blaming and guilting. And it becomes a way of life and they become comfortable in their own misery. It's fear.
And I'm always looking for the healing. And I was just thinking about this last night. This interview is going totally differently than what I thought it would go. But I have an idea that, and I don't know if I can put it into a children's book, but I just thought, generations of parents, there's been one parent who feels like, oh, growing up, and this was, a kid, oh, I didn't get what I needed. Oh, I'm going to give this kid of mine what I didn't get. And this kid wants something else. And it just like filters down through generations where no one ever feels like they're getting what they needed, even though we're evolving and things are getting better in many ways. Still there's some kid going, okay, they didn't beat me, but all I wanted was affirmation, or all I wanted was, so there's always something, there's some gaping wound that people have, and it seems like we have to find a way to fill that through something other than our parents, through our own connection to God.
Yeah, absolutely. We really, it's so funny, parents don't realize, not funny, haha, but parents don't realize what they do to their kids while they're doing it. They don't even know. But they're doing the same things that was done to them. And everybody always says, I am never going to do that to a child. And guess what happens? They do the same thing. And the reason they do the same thing is because they have not told themselves the truth about themselves. That's hard work. It really is hard. It's a scary place to be. It really is. That's a very scary place. The most difficult work you'll ever do, being honest with yourself.
But honesty frees us. Like I look at, just use a random situation. So say one woman didn't feel loved by her mom. She thinks, I'm going to shower this child with love, and she's going to love me so much and it's going to be perfect. And the child isn't getting what she needs because it's different. And then she feels unloved again. And then this child, and it just goes on and it's this domino effect. But if someone is honest and they go, you know what? I'm trying to love you, my kid, but I don't know how. What do you need? Like that might be a beginning. Is that a beginning when you just kind of go, I don't know?
Sure it is. I don't know is a great answer. It really is. And there's this thing about what you said just a minute ago, freeing yourself. What is it you're freeing yourself from? See, that's the scary question. Because when you are very honest with yourself, what you are freeing yourself from is your environment, possibly your spouse, your parents, everything that you have become comfortable with. Is that free? Or is that scary as hell? See what I'm saying? This is a two-way street here. It's a dangerous place to be, but it's also just simply magnificent if you're able to do it.
Yeah. So what's the healing for young kids in college right now who are taking psychology classes and kind of realize, I came from a really messed up family system and I've got all of this going on and now I'm dealing with some of my own addiction issues. Like, what do you tell young kids before it gets too far?
Can I say I don't know? You know what the answer seriously is? Something that I don't know that humanity has totally come to terms with yet. Forgiveness. Do you know how hard offering forgiveness to someone else is? Offering that forgiveness to yourself. It's even harder. It's going to take us joining our humanity and our divinity to truly understand forgiveness. People don't even understand forgiveness. Just like people don't understand surrender. And those two things are what is vitally important for you to use that freeing in the positive sense.
So how do you understand forgiveness?
Oh, forgiveness. It's funny. I heard Oprah say at one point, forgiving someone is a gift to give yourself, but that doesn't mean you have to sit down and have tea with them the next day. And I heard that, you know, it takes me a long time. I hate to admit that, but it's the truth.
Yeah, me too. I admit it.
It takes me a long time to forget. I despise betrayal. And to me, betrayal is all kinds of things, even abandonment, even death. I felt that a lot. When Steve was dying, he was betraying me because he was abandoning me, like it was his choice. So forgiveness for me is something that is very difficult. Now, I am very capable of saying, you're out of my life forever and never think on you again. I'm so capable of that. But really forgiving, is very difficult for me. And I think it's for a lot of people.
It is for me. I'll admit it. And I just gave myself an out. I said there might be a couple of people I never forgive. That's fine. Even though I didn't like the idea of being a little bit bitter until the day I died, that seemed wrong on some level. But it came without trying. It came like almost out of nowhere, but with a lot of spiritual work. It wasn't aimed at forgiveness. It was just work on myself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because the only way you can forgive someone is working on yourself. You don't have to do anything on them because they were the ones that hurt you. They were the ones that betrayed you. They were the ones that did whatever it was. And they're not going to change.
I joke that I feel like I was a mafia boss in another life, like forgiveness. I'm like, chop your head off. Like, no, not forgiveness. I don't know, that's like terrible.
Lucy was right. We're part of the same tribe.
But I was like, forgive. But then it's like my soul took flight, kind of like with the near-death experience. I know it on a soul level. You fly away from everything that is, and you just want people to do well. Just be better, go live a good life, enjoy. I mean, that's to me.
But you don't have to be part of mine.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes I feel very bad about that because I understand and I felt the total forgiveness that I was given by God himself, by all creation. I mean, it was like the slate was wiped clean, but I can't do that. And I feel bad about that sometimes because I know I should, but in the back of my mind, I'm going, there are some things that I can't forgive. So, I work on it. But here again, it depends on who it is, whether I work on it or not, or just say, bye, have a good life, like you.
Yeah, the bye, have a good life is important, but it's interesting. Forgiveness came when I loved myself more and more and more and more, because why am I going to give someone space in my head, as they say, like, why am I going to do that? Like, that's not good for me. And so to just set them free was better for me, all those people in the past. And
I understand that. And for me, it sounds so trite, but it's a question of justice. Okay? It's a question of justice, pure and simple. Is someone going to be held responsible and accountable? And if they're not, they deserve my forgiveness. Now, of course, on the spiritual, the answer is yes, absolutely, because everyone's doing the best they can, or so they say. But on the human level, I'm like, it's very difficult for me.
I do know, and with that, we're getting really philosophical here. Like, it's easy to forgive when there's truth on both sides, like when everything's out in the open and there's truth. But if someone, in parent-child relationship or whatever, if someone is dedicated to their lies and their facade, then there's no communication around the forgiveness. It's just you have to forgive that someone's living in a lie.
Yeah. I camouflage my non-forgiveness by saying they don't belong in my life. It was negative. I get rid of all negativity, all that, whatever. I'm going to do my own thing. And I can hide behind that, okay, most of the time.
Yeah. So my last question here is, you've worked in hospice and this is intense work. And what has that meant to you on your journey? Like when you look at it, and I know that you're pivoting in a different direction, but why did you feel called to do that? And I read about it in the book, and so I know some of these answers, but I just want the listeners to hear.
It was something I had to do. I didn't choose it. I had to do it in the beginning. It was very selfish because I was looking to get back to that place where I was taken, and I figured maybe I could hitchhike a ride with somebody that was dying and they'd take me back. Of course, it never happened again. But then it became just this wondrous experience every time. Because watching, I don't know if a lot of people understand this. I believe the soul starts to disconnect from the body when the soul doesn't need the body anymore. Watching that process is one of the most amazing things you will ever experience in your life. People say, they've seen the light go out in their eyes and all that stuff, and I think, that's not what I see. That's not what I see anymore. I see this transition to something that is so magnificent. And I know I've told you this before. A lot of times I have to leave the room because my initial reaction is to smile. Because in my mind, they're there. They know they're there. You don't want to do that when there's family around that has just lost somebody because they look at you like they want to throat punch you. Because how can you be happy that they've just lost someone they love? But for me, to be able to share that sacred moment with someone, I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. It gives me so much peace, and it just reinforces what I know to be true.
That's beautifully said. I get it. I consider doing it, and I worry that I'd get excited too. I'd be like, oh, they're going to the light. Oh my God, I can't wait.
You would, because you're like, hey, take so-and-so a message for me.
Exactly. And you can't show that joy in front of people, but there's a knowing of where they're going that is incredibly peaceful.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
What are you working on now? I know you might not want to talk too much about it, but what are your future projects?
Oh my gosh, I'm working on another book right now, second book.
Yay!
Which you are in, by the way. And this is really a book about women remembering who they are. Saying no to living by default, saying no to giving someone authority over their lives. This is about redefining, rewriting, restructuring according to who you're supposed to be. Because most of us live not that way, and waking up to those voices, that say, hello, I'm here. And redesigning your own landscape. That's what this book is about. It's great. I'm not doing too much hospice work anymore. I'm still hospital. I've stopped a lot of the marriage counseling. It's time. I had been looking at myself, and I realized something the other day. It was hard for me to admit. I have been hiding myself behind degrees and credentials for so long coming out from behind them, you know, peering over that obelisk, okay, and seeing what was not feeding the essence of my soul anymore. Realizing that is changing everything that I'm doing. And that's what this book is really about. And it's fun.
I love it. And I know what you mean. There's a point, well, I read through your bio and I was like, oh my gosh, she's done so much. There's so much. and it's cool on one hand, you know, it's wonderful, but yeah, that we move the furniture of our lives around and then just see a different opening because we're always growing, you know, we're always growing. When I wrote my book, I was not at forgiveness level. And I was like, oh, what if it happens? And then it's totally different. Well, it did. You know, everything changed.
Yeah. In the last few days, I have come to realize that I have not been feeding myself. I've been starving. And I didn't even realize it until I started looking at who I truly was all over again. You know, the girl who defined herself in the when I was in my 20s and 30s. That is not who I am anymore. And yet I've been living that life. Not anymore.
Fascinating.
I've already told my family, watch out, I'm coming through.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with me. This was a beautiful interview. Loved it.
Thank you, Tricia. It's always a joy talking with you.